Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. I am your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also the administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord, moderator at Reddit's r/sake subreddit, and our resident sake nerd.
And I am your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, I'm a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be tasting and chatting about all things sake, and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand. So John, you're not going to believe it, but we have an honest-to-goodness superhero joining us today.
Oh, in the studio.
Yes.
Wonderful. So
have you ever heard of a sake superhero before?
I think so.
Faster than a speeding bullet train.
Would he also be stronger than a double genshu?
And he can leap over Tokyo Tower in a single bound. Today we are welcoming Sakeman Red.
Hello, citizens of the sake world.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Sakeman Red, also known as Nick Matsumoto. Nick, thank you so much for being with us today. Now, Sakeman is a group of guys who do sake sales and distribution. They have a wonderful portfolio of sakes that they represent, but they do it with a really unique uniform and a really unique look, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys very much. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this. I've been listening to you guys' podcasts, and I miss hanging out with you guys out in New York, but when I hear your guys' voices, it feels like I'm back. So thanks again for having me.
Aw, I feel the same way, minus the podcast bit. I think that while we know you pretty well, we want to, for our listeners at home, Nick, give us a little bit of background. How did you get into sake, all that sort of thing?
Well, to be honest, when I first started with my sake experiences, it was just having hot sake with my mom. Once I turned 21, she was super excited because she didn't have to drink hot sake alone. And one of her first things when I turned 21 was, oh, good, I don't have to drink sake by myself anymore. So that was my first experience. And then through my first passion through judo led me to LA. And that introduced me to a gentleman named Takuya Shimamura and Victor Huin. And that was about, let's say, Christmas of 2013. And then after the new year, Victor gave me Takuya-san's information saying, hey, he wants to talk to you. And so I was like, oh, about Sakeman? And he's like, oh, we'll see. Because I've already heard about them. I knew that they were doing this crazy job where they get to promote sake. They go to really nice restaurants and they wear these crazy masks, crazy luchador masks. And that just really appealed to me. And then sure enough, that year on National Sake Day, October 1st, I was officially hired to start working as Sakeman. And then at that time, we were Sakeman 1, 2, and 3. We were just numbers.
So no colors yet.
No colors. Yeah, the original was just numbers. Sakeman 1 was Takuya since he was the first. Then Victor was number 2, Sakeman Green. And then myself, which 3 is my favorite number, which, again, all these good signs, right? Starting on National Sake Day, meeting these guys through judo, and then being the third person hired on. But Sakeman really wasn't a brand, so to speak. It was like this cool idea that we got from Shichida-san in Saga. He is the sponsor of Mr. Tenzan Man, a pro wrestler in the Saga prefecture who has his own mask and has the 10 kanji on his face. And so Shichida-san brought that mask with him when he would promote sake in the States because he knew it's fun, and Americans love things that stand out, and helped him stand out. And then Takuya and Victor took that idea. It's like, oh, we should keep doing that.
Yeah. So for those people who have not heard about Sakeman before, can you describe a little bit about the Sakeman philosophy? So far, we've established that you're selling sake, you're wearing luchador masks. What's the philosophy behind Sakeman?
Right. Well, like our mission really is to save the world from just only knowing sake bombs, or saving the world from just boring sake, or has like that negative kind of connotation of thinking like there's only box sake or cheap sake, which is great to start, I guess, keeps your bar pretty low. And then as we get introduced to our brands that we know of, like Haikai-san, the Sakeman brands and all that, we want to introduce people to a new experience and save them from not liking sake. Because if you like beer, if you like wine, you'll love sake. It's just you need people like you guys that are there to help hold the hand of the citizen that's new to sake. So that's kind of like our driving theme, is to bring sake to the world. And then our core actions are to work hard, train hard, play hard. We work hard to visit our customers, to grow, to develop, to spread the good word of sake. Another thing is that we try to always train to have healthy bodies so we can continue to do so. But then the play hard is to drink with our friends. We don't want to represent sake in a way where it's like, oh, we're unhealthy people. It's going to cause you to be obese, something like that. So there's a whole mission behind it other than just, oh, we're here to drink with masks on our faces.
So you mentioned the training, and you mentioned earlier that your first passion was the judo. How did the judo exactly fit into all of this? How did that happen?
Right. So I've been doing judo since I was 7. Takuya Sakeman Blue, our vice president, started when he was like in his 30s, like pretty late in life, relatively speaking, late in life, because his doctor was telling him, you need to do something. Like, you're not healthy, and the way you're going. If anyone knows Takuya-san, he loves to eat well with friends and have a good time, but his body wasn't keeping up. So he was introduced to judo out here in Sawtell.
So it's almost like taking Sakeman Blue's history as an example of encouraging people to work hard, play hard, and drink hard. He's the example that you're trying to bring to other people. It's like, you can go out there and have the great food, you can drink the great stuff, but you gotta make sure you take care of yourself too. Right.
And so Takuya met Victor through judo, and Takuya-san was needing to hire people, and he loved how when in judo, there's a thing called randori, where you're sparring, right? And you can really get to know someone when you spar with them. You can get to know their personality. Are they strong? Are they overconfident? Are they very self-cautious? Are they polite? Are they rude? You get to get all these things because you don't have time to think about hiding who you truly are because someone's trying to throw you into the ground. And so Takuya is really big on hiring judo people because of that relationship. And then in the community, he can ask other senseis, oh, do you know Victor? Do you know Nick? What do you think about them? And then I found out later, before he hired me, he was talking to Tokuzan, who later became Sakeman White, but he was asking, hey, what do you think of Nick? And so it's really big that we don't demand that you do judo because we understand. But to start out, that's how we got to know really good people, with having to cut out all the waste. We don't have to waste time with conversation. We kind of get to know you within 5 minutes through judo and through sparring and all that. So that just kind of became the trend. Right now, we can't really do much judo, so we can't use that as like a way to find people. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's how it started. Our big thing now, at least for me, is like, we just want you to have an activity you like to do. It could be yoga, it could be hiking, it could be basketball, it could be whatever. But if you were to work for us, we want you to have that other passion too, that keeps you active and keeps you part of a community.
Cool. I've seen you guys standing behind a table at sake events and having the masks on, the luchador masks, and introducing sake to people. It really does grab attention, but I've always wondered, what is the strangest reaction you guys have ever gotten when you've appeared as Sake Man?
Strangest reaction? That's a great question. It's kind of always the same weird reaction, or like where some guy, usually a guy, wants to start wrestling us. But it's like, it's like usually later in the day when after the tastings, as you guys know, people get pretty confident. They're like, oh, how do I get a mask? I'm like, you have to beat either Sakeman White or Blue, who are like the biggest Japanese people you've ever met. And oh, by the way, Sakeman White's like a 7-time national champion, and so good luck. But people always want to wrestle us. I think is always the main thing because they assume we do wrestling, and it's close enough. We do judo, but yeah, it's not really too weird. It's always, hey, can we wrestle you? It's like, probably not.
That is such an end of the sake event thing to say.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're sake man? Come on.
Yeah, it's always a positive reaction though. People are always like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? What is this? I don't think we've ever had a negative reaction. It's like, that's a terrible idea. Like no one's criticized us that way. Everyone's very welcoming with it.
It's very fun too. I mean, that's the point, right? Fun. It's really fun.
Exactly. But the biggest impact is when we're a little tiny table at a huge wine expo, right? There's like 100 different wine providers spread out through this entire banquet room. And there's 3 cute little sake tables pushed to the side, with usually some Japanese person with a hoppy coat, apron, a lot of kanji, a lot of banners, and all of that. And of course, event starts, people come in, they're like, cute, sake's here, but I'm gonna go try all of these different wines. But it's like, I'll be right back. Put the mask on, and then all of a sudden, people are like, wait, what? I thought this was sake. It's like, oh, it is. But that gets the conversation going. That gets people's attention. They're like, oh, I had to come at least ask what you guys are doing over here.
So you've been selling sake on the East Coast, and you've been selling sake on the West Coast.
Yes.
How's that been different?
Extremely different.
Ooh.
Very, very different. I got the job here in LA, but I was only here for about 8 months, or working for the company for 8 months before I got moved over to New York, which I was reluctant at first, but best decision I ever made. I love that on the East Coast, everyone's trying to learn more about something. Everyone's very interested in what's new, something they haven't seen before. If they go to a restaurant and there's this event going on, they all want to partake because it's something different and exciting, possibly. But if we do an event in New York, let's say like 90% of people that come will participate. LA, it's like 10%, because their first reaction is, oh, I don't drink sake, or no, I'm just here to eat. Like it's not popular, right? It's not. So it is definitely a struggle, but I don't want to talk bad about LA because they are trying. There are more restaurants wanting to sell more sake, get into it. I think a lot of the older generation is starting to pass it on to the younger generation, and they don't want their sake menu to look like everybody else's sake menu. But it's crazy. Like I say LA because San Diego, we just did an event last night in San Diego. They're into the craft stuff. They are into learning what's new, what's not popular, what is something I can't find in all of the Japanese markets. Same with like Oregon. Marcus Paxter's has been doing an awesome job out there with changing menus up, with getting by the glass on the menus. Being an evangelist out there. So LA is still a little behind, but coming up. But like places like San Diego and Oregon and as far as the West Coast are really like the New York style, where they want to do new things, they want to try new things. But yeah, it was a tough transition coming back to LA. I'll say that.
I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume in the before times you got the chance to visit Japan and visit some of the brewers. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Every end of February, we would always take a trip for about a week, 2 weeks. Yeah.
What were some of your favorite places that you visited in Japan for sake?
That's a great question, because there's also different. First one that comes to mind is Yamagata-san, because he's our president for one, and he was one of the first brewers I visited on my first trip for sake. But I remember when I was leaving, because I got to know the worker, the kurobito, and I got kind of emotional, because it was the first time I really saw how hard it is to make sake. Because for those that don't know, it's tough. Like, I'm surprised sake has made it this long without the younger generation. Like, I'm not doing that. So that was really interesting.
What part of Japan was that?
That was in Yamaguchi.
Oh, Yamaguchi. Okay.
Yeah, Yamaguchi. And then right next door to him is Harada-san, Hatsumomiji. And then that one I was blown away because it's such a tiny facility. It's just the 4 people making sake. They do it year round. So it's like inside of that facility, it's like year round winter. So I don't know. There's so different experiences when you visit these brewers. But the most unique, I think, hit most was when I went for the first time and just really saw the hard work it takes. We're there at each brewer for, let's say, like 2 days max. And I'm exhausted. Like, if you're not making sake, like for, let's say 30% of it is making sake, 70% is cleaning everything, right? And trying to squeeze in a rest and a break and a meal. And to see these guys and know that these people are doing it for all of winter, for months on end, and you're like, man, I salute you. Thank you for creating this awesome beverage that makes its way to Little America, and for the most part, people enjoy. And that was my mission, was to try to express how hard it is to make this thing people call sake.
That's a little bit of that work hard, play hard. They're working so hard so that we can play.
Right, exactly. So it still falls into our core action items, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of this awesome beverage, one thing we always do during our podcast is we always squeeze in a little tasting of our own. And Sakeman has a portfolio of sakes that you represent, that you are selling here in the States. And we've all brought one of those sakes from your portfolio. So what we usually do, Nick, is we take just a second at the beginning and just introduce the sakes we all have, and then one by one we'll go and taste them. So since you're our guest, Nick, why don't you introduce just really briefly the sake that you brought to taste with us today?
All right. Well, I just mentioned this brewery. It's Hatsumomiji Mr. Harada. The brand is Harada, and it's called the Harada 80. It's a junmai that uses a sake rice that's been polished only to 80%. So tiny little brewery and very, very unique. We don't call it a tokubetsu. We could, but so it's called Harada 80. One of my favorite junmais right now.
Now, for our listeners, 80% is not very finely milled. So that's more of a robust rice grain, right? That's kind of unique.
Correct.
That's unique in the world of premium sake. So I'm going to really be interested to hear about that. And that you mentioned just a moment ago, that's from Yamaguchi Prefecture.
That is correct.
Right. So, John, what do you have?
I have the Suihiro Junmai Ginjo Yamahai. This one is actually from Fukushima. And Nick, do you have any background on this one?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Suihiro Brewery was actually the brewery that developed the Yamahai style. It's like background like in 1910. A gentleman, Kagi-san, who was a professor scientist at the brewery. During the wartime, they didn't have the manpower to do kimoto, which of course you guys know, and as most of your listeners know, it's very labor intensive. And he discovered that actually we don't have to mix it. If we just basically let it sit there, this lactic activity is going to happen anyways. So that that later became known as Yamahai, of course, the Yamaoroshi Haishi, meaning stop the mashing. So that was developed at this brewery, and this is their Junmai Ginjo version of that.
Fantastic. And Tim, what are you drinking?
I have a very beautiful sake. It's called Fukuju, and it's from Kobe Shushinkan Brewery. It's their Junmai Ginjo. And if you've ever heard of Kobe beef, this is the same famous Kobe region. And it's in Hyogo Prefecture. And this is an absolutely delicious, very, very beautiful sake. So I'm super excited to get this open.
Ooh, I actually have empirical evidence that at one point, at least, this was my favorite Sakeman sake. We'll go into that a little bit later on about how that came about, but I have a history with that one.
Nice.
So, Nick, why don't you open up that Harada 80?
Okay. Well, I've already been sipping on it, but I think I've got one more. I'm just going to pretend.
Why don't we pretend that we're opening up that Harada 80?
You all know the
glug,
noise,
glug, glug,
and
our Foley people are great. Don't worry about it.
They're all right. Perfect. So I've poured myself a fresh pour of Harada 80.
Fantastic. You want to give us a little rundown of the aroma?
Sure, of course. So my biggest thing on this one is right off the bat is a lot of pineapple and a lot of melon, which of course is common, but the pineapple is what threw me off the most.
Yeah.
Especially with you, if you talk to us sake guys and you talk about rice polishing, and if it's a big number, usually it's going to give you a really ricey, really cereal, a lot of robust flavors. But to have this like super fruity aroma, I feel is pretty rare, pretty unique. For me, that's always what I smell. And it's a little bit like a coconut too, but definitely a sweeter aroma. And of course, no additives. They didn't add a little bit of pineapple. They didn't use pineapple yeast by any means. It is just a local yeast and Yamada Nishiki 80, but it's Mr. Harada's special touch that I feel pulls this out. I've asked him, and even he was surprised how fruity it came out. Like even he was like, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that."
I'm stunned when I hear that a sake that has rice only milled to 80% can be fruity. That's bonkers to me. That's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember the first time I drank it, I was with him at one of our sake expos. I just gave him a hug. I don't know how you do it, man, but you make some insane sake.
That's right.
And he's like, "Oh, gee, thanks." And a quick side note too, that I mentioned there's only 4 people that work here. 3 of those people are female. 2 of those females graduated from a high school that offer sake making courses. So for me, I think everything comes into play with making sake, especially like the energy that's in the environment. So to have this younger generation making sake could have had something to do with these youthful, younger flavors coming out in the sake too. I don't know, but I feel like that definitely came into play.
That's interesting. I will take my turn now.
It's always a sound of a good time once you hear the bottles crack.
So, John, you've got that Suehiro Junmai Ginjo Yamahai.
Right. Usually the aroma that I get on a Yamahai is very earthy. And that's not what I'm getting from this. This is a little bit lighter on the nose and definitely a little bit fruitier. A little bright.
Yeah, and with Suehiro too, they're known for their own special yeast, basically. So it's not a kyokai yeast. It is what they saved for generations and generations in this deep freeze. And anytime they need more, they just kind of pluck a little bit out and cultivate that. So you're tasting what probably the samurai yeast too. With the samurai yeast.
Tasting this is very interesting, though. It's not. The aroma led me to believe it was going to be a little bit lighter. I think I mentioned that it didn't come across very earthy, but when I sip on it, that earthiness is there, but being milled down to 55%, this is actually Gohyaku Mangoku rice that's milled down to 55. It's still like really like refreshing and bright. It's there is that bit of that soft earthiness to it, a little bump of acidity at the end there. That's really nice. This is very well balanced, and this is going to be something that I think would really go well with food. I think I'm doing myself a slight disservice by just sipping it, but this is really nice stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting with Yamahai. You know, when Yamahai is handled in a very careful way, it can add a depth of flavor. It's not necessarily going to be earthy or bold. Yamahai has that reputation, and it can be very bold and robust. But if it's handled with a very deft touch, with a very gentle touch, I think you can get a nice depth of flavor, but it doesn't overwhelm. It gives you an added dimension to the sake that's really lovely.
Yeah, this is still very, very soft. Like this is still, even though it's Yamahai, and again, that Yamahai presence is there, but it's not overwhelming, and it's not the only thing that you taste when you taste it. There's a lot more to offer on this. This is really nice. Now, Tim, I think it is your turn to open up that Fukuju.
Yes, so I have, this is again from Kobe in Hyogo Prefecture. I have the Fukuju. So this is a very wonderful brewery to visit. I think, Nick, you had the chance to visit the Kobe Shushinkan Brewery?
Yes, I did. That was my first trip as Sakeman.
Yeah, they have a wonderful brewery, beautiful gift shop, and they also have an amazing restaurant right on the brewery. So when you go there, you can visit the gift shop, you can do a little tour, and they have tours available in different languages too. So it's very open to people to come and visit. And the restaurant is amazing. You can get this amazing kaiseki food. And oh my gosh, the variety of sakes they have right there at the brewery to pair with the food. It's a little slice of Hyogo heaven for me whenever I visit there. It's just so wonderful. So this has, bringing back a lot of memories smelling this, it has a very wonderful fruity characteristic. And I think that's something that is well known for this sake, that it's very luscious and very fruity, very engaging.
And that's also the official toasting beverage at the Nobel Prize banquet as well in Stockholm. So it's definitely crowd friendly. It's my go-to for like first time sake drinkers. Yeah, and to go back to your main point, Kobe Shushinkan is a very tourist friendly brewery. It's not out in the sticks, so to speak. I can't recommend them enough because of how much you can learn from them and experience.
One of these days, I'm going to get over there, guys. One day, someday.
Once this little pandemic is over.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick, though, my empirical evidence is that a few years back, I attended a Sakeman hosted blind tasting. The
Sake Masquerade?
Yes, the Sake Masquerade. And it included every sake that was in the portfolio at the time. This was the sake that I enjoyed the most in a completely blind tasting environment, and I was surprised because I totally thought it was going to be a different sake. But I ended up coming out of that, learning a lot about my personal tastes. Guys, if you at home have the opportunity to do any sort of blind tasting, I cannot recommend it enough. It's an amazing way to learn a lot about your personal tastes without letting things like the milling percentage or the classification or where it's from get in the way. Packaging, right.
The way the bottle looks.
It's purely just you and the sake, and you don't know what it is, and you're just tasting it, enjoying it, and giving yourself an honest assessment of how much you're enjoying it. It's a wonderful habit. It's a great thing to do. So Tim, we left you off at the aroma there.
Yeah. So
I cut you off at the aroma there.
I think this sake is really well known for being approachable, easy drinking, very, very smooth, and super clean with a fruity edge to it. That's how I've always described this sake. But it's something that I would grab if somebody said, where should I start? For me, this is a good sake to introduce people to sake with. And it's approachable, it's easy drinking, it's luscious, and it's just all around great introduction sake for me. So this is something I always use as a way to get people their first step into sake. And it is just so luscious and really, really delicious that it's, I would say, irresistible in many ways for me.
And that all checks out. So, Nick, real quick question though.
Yes, sir.
Masks. They're a big topic these days.
Yeah. Ours are the opposite of what you're supposed to be wearing.
All right. Well, that is true. But you guys are ahead of the game with mask wearing.
I don't know. It's interesting now to have to wear masks on masks when we do our events. So, yeah, I mean, I feel, I don't know, like a hipster in a way that, yeah, we were wearing masks before they were cool and the right thing to do, excluding Asian countries in America. We put the mask game on the map, I guess, so to speak.
So when you do wear masks on mask, how do they go? How do you layer them? What goes on top?
So it's funny because before we had to we put the Sakeman mask on and then stuff our cotton mask underneath it. It's really uncomfortable. But last night we had the special ones that can just go over the face better. They don't have to go around your ears. They go around the neck and the head. So we use those now. There's even this little extender piece I got from my girlfriend because my head is enormous and sometimes masks are too small. And that works perfectly too for going around the mask. So yeah, we found our workaround. I don't think we're going to ask Japan to custom make us COVID approved Sakeman masks because the whole point was to make sure we can drink and wear our masks at the same time. So yeah.
Well, I think that's amazing. You guys get extra points for really adapting and making the best of a really tough situation without giving up on the masks. I love it.
No, of course. Yeah, even Tokusan would put a little custom Sakeman stamp on his cloth mask to make it a Sakeman mask.
That sounds good. I like that.
Super creative. Yeah. So I mean, we might start doing that for the fans of Sakeman that want to quote Sakeman mask. We'll give them that one.
I am a. You don't have to sell me on sake swag.
Yeah, indeed, that's one of my dreams is to have some more Sakeman swagger to start selling or hand out at events or whatever. But we'll stick with sake for now.
Yeah, you guys have some good stickers too. I've gotten some good vinyl stickers from Sakeman events.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of stickers as well.
Yeah. So Nick, if people are interested in learning more about Sakeman, where should they go? How can they reach you?
You can find us on Instagram at Go Sakeman. We post pretty much everything there, all our events, everything, and then that also goes to our Facebook at Go Sakeman. We're working on our Twitter and YouTube and other platforms, but right now that's the best way is to give us a follow on Go Sakeman.
So Nick, I really want to thank you so much for joining us. It was really fun having you today.
Thank you guys again for the invite, and I would love to do it again someday if you guys can pencil Sakeman back in and cover more of this. It's my first podcast I've ever done, so thank you. Arigato.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all our listeners for tuning in. We really do hope that you're enjoying our show. If you'd like to show your support for Sake Revolution, one way you can really help us out would be to take a couple of minutes and leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best ways for us to get the word out about our show.
And also, please make sure that you subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. This way you will not miss a single episode. And while you're at it, encourage a friend to subscribe as well.
And as always, to learn more about any of the topics or the sakes that we talked about in today's episode, be sure to visit our website, sakerevolution.com, for all the detailed show notes.
And, of course, if you have sake questions that need to be answered, sakes that you want us to taste, sake superheroes you want us to interview, please reach out to us at feedback@sakerevolution.com. So until next time, please remember to keep drinking sake and... Kanpai!